So, what if the way we've been thinking about spiritual growth is actually missing the point? We're about to dive into a powerful idea from a guide called The Relational Foundation, and it suggests we might be overlooking the one thing that changes everything.
The source material we're looking at jumps right in with this massive question. I mean, it's a bold thing to even suggest there is a single number one issue, right? But the author uses this to frame a problem they believe is at the root of everything else.
And here's their answer. It's a condition they call spiritual orphanhood. Now, the key thing here isn't about not knowing enough facts. It's about a lack of real felt connection. It's the idea that you can know everything about God as a father, but still live your life like you don't have one.
And according to the guide, this isn't some rare thing. We're talking about people who are in church every single week for years. There's this huge gap between what the Bible says about family and sonship and inheritance and how so many of us are actually experiencing our faith day to day. This quote really shows you what's at stake. The argument here is that this internal relational problem has huge consequences on the outside. It's not just about our own personal feelings, it's about our ability to make a real difference in the world. So that begs the question, how do we even begin to fix this? Well, before we can build a solution, the guide says we have to tear down a couple of common myths. These are ideas that have maybe unintentionally put up walls and stopped us from fixing this whole spiritual orphan problem. Okay, first up, who can receive discipleship? The traditional thinking is that it's something you do with people who are already Christians. But the source flips this completely on its head. It argues that discipleship, walking with someone and teaching them about Jesus, is actually the path to becoming a believer in the first place. It's the invitation, not the after-party. And this idea comes straight from the source. The command Jesus gave wasn't just to get people to say a prayer or become a church member. He said to go and make disciples. People who are learning and growing and following. And that process, well, that's what leads to a truly transformed life. The second myth is all about who's qualified to do the discipling. We tend to think this is a job for pastors or paid staff, right? The professionals. But the source argues, no, this is a responsibility for every mature believer. It's on all of us. Whew, this quote is a real gut punch, isn't it? It perfectly shows why just sitting in a big room and listening to talks isn't enough. I mean, nobody would raise their kids that way. Real growth, just like raising a family, takes personal, hands-on, consistent relationship. So, if the old way isn't working, what's the alternative? Well, this is where the guide lays out a really clear step-by-step framework. It's what they call the 4 levels of discipleship, and it's all about moving from being on your own to being in a deep, life-giving spiritual family. Let's just walk through this. Level 1, you've got your unaccountable believers, people who say they're Christians but are basically going it alone. Level 2 is when you're part of the crowd, you show up, but there's no personal connection. Now, level 3 is where it gets real. You're being mentored, someone is pouring into you. But level 4, that's the goal, a parenting or fathering relationship. We're talking a lifelong bond focused on legacy. The Apostle Paul wrote this thousands of years ago, and it really gets to the heart of that jump from level 3 to level 4. We can have tons of teachers, right? Lots of instructors, but spiritual fathers, those who take on that deep, lifelong family-like role, they're rare and they are so, so valuable. Okay, so all of this sounds really personal, one-on-one, maybe even kind of small. But what if this deep relational approach is actually the secret to explosive, world-changing growth? This last part of the guide shows the incredible math behind it all. The whole idea is super simple. Just imagine one person commits to really pouring their life into just 12 other people, the way Jesus did with his disciples. That's it. It all starts with just one person, deciding to take this seriously. But here's where it gets mind-blowing. Imagine those 12 people each go and do the same thing, and then their 12 do the same. After just 4 generations of this, that one person's investment has multiplied into over 20,000 disciples. See, the growth isn't just adding up, it's multiplying exponentially. And if you take it just one more step, a 5th generation, that number balloons to almost 250,000 people. It is absolutely staggering to think about the potential locked inside this simple relational model. And that just brings everything back to the main point. This incredible power of multiplication isn't just a cool idea or a nice little strategy. According to the source, it's the intended outcome of a direct command from Jesus. It's not a suggestion. So what does this actually look like in real life? Well, the guide says it's not complicated. This kind of discipleship works best not in giant auditoriums, but in the simple spaces of our lives, around a dinner table, in a living room, places where real, authentic relationships can actually be built.
So, to wrap it all up, this is really a call to get back to a foundational, relational kind of faith. It's a journey that definitely challenges some of our traditions for sure, but according to the source, it's also a journey that holds the real key to healing spiritual orphanhood, and it's already changing lives all over the globe.
And that brings us to the final, very personal question the guide leaves us with. It stops being about a concept and becomes a direct challenge to each of us. After seeing the problem, the solution, and the incredible potential, the only thing left to ask is, are you willing to take the journey?
Okay, what if the version of the gospel that most of us have heard is actually incomplete? What if it's missing some of its most important pieces? Today, we're going to explore a text that really challenges us to take a fresh look at what it all means. Let's get into it. So, the source we're diving into today kicks off with this really provocative question. It's designed to make you just stop and think for a second. Are we telling the whole story, or are we just sharing the highlight reel? That's the core idea we're going to be unpacking. All right, so to even start to answer a huge question like that, we first have to look at the version of the story that so many of us are familiar with. The source material has a name for it, the Get to Heaven plan. Does that sound kind of familiar? This source calls this a partial gospel. It basically frames our life here on earth as something you just have to get through, endure, with salvation being the ultimate escape plan. In this way of thinking, heaven isn't really part of the journey. It's the final destination, the exit strategy. But what if there's way more to it? This is where the source really pivots. It argues that by focusing only on an escape plan, we completely miss Jesus' central message. See, he talked a lot less about a future destination and way more about something immediate, something expansive, a kingdom. Okay, 162. Just a number on a screen. What in the world does this have to do with anything? Well, according to this text, this number is actually the key to understanding what Jesus cared about most in his message. And there it is. The phrase kingdom of God or kingdom of heaven shows up 162 times. The source argues this is no accident. I mean, that kind of repetition makes it pretty clear. The kingdom wasn't just a theme for Jesus, it was the central theme. It was the good news he told his followers to go out and spread. And this famous line really hammers the point home. Seek first the kingdom. The source frames this as the main directive. It's not just a nice thought, it's a command to completely recenter your entire life's priorities around it. So this slide really lays out the two views side by side. On one hand, you have salvation as the destination, the finish line you cross after you die. But on the other hand, in the gospel of the kingdom, salvation is just the entrance. It's the doorway into a reality that's happening right now. It's a huge shift from an escape plan to, well, more of an invasion plan, where heaven's culture starts showing up here on earth. So if salvation is just the entrance, what's actually in the house? The source makes a powerful point here. By focusing only on the door, we've missed the whole reason we were invited inside in the first place. So let's look at what it says are the missing pieces. You see, the full gospel adds these crucial dimensions. It completely shifts the question from what we're saved from to what we're saved for. And that includes our spiritual inheritance, learning how to operate with God's authority in the present, and figuring out how to live in these new kingdom relationships right now. And get this, understanding the kingdom this way doesn't just change your future, it fundamentally changes your identity in the present. It's not about who you will be one day, but about who the source says you are right now. The source highlights three core identities. First, there's the bride of Christ, which speaks to a deep intimacy. Second is sonship, and the text is really clear that this is a role of inheritance for everyone, both men and women, signifying legal rights and authority. And third, a royal priesthood, which means we're meant to actually represent God's rule here on earth. And the legal mechanism for all of this? It's adoption. The source argues this is a profound and often missed idea. It means you're not just a pardoned criminal. You are a fully adopted child, legally given a new family name, a new identity, and a full inheritance. It changes everything. So when you put this all together, it points to one massive shift in perspective. The huge takeaway from the source is moving the kingdom from being just a future hope to being a present reality that we live in today. Honestly, I think this metaphor from the text just perfectly summarizes the entire argument. If we've only ever been talking about the door, we've completely missed out on the feast, the family, and the purpose happening inside the rest of the house. So this means the gospel isn't just good news about what God will do someday. It's good news about his reign and his rule breaking into our world right here, right now, through his people. It's an active, present tense reality. So we're going to end with the question the source leaves us with. If this is all true, if the kingdom isn't just some future destination, but a present reality we've already stepped into, what does that change about how we live today? That's definitely a thought worth exploring.